My job, basically, is to answer the question, what is love? Now, it seems reasonably straightforward, and I'm sure that you have an answer to that question. But over the nearly 15 years that I've been studying it, I've come up with lots of answers. But if we wanted to answer that question at the most basic level of explanation, the answer is simple. Love is about survival. We are the most cooperative species on this planet, just by the number of people we can cooperate with. On average, you have 150 people in your social network who you know and see regularly. That's known as Dunbar's number, both in terms of the context in which you cooperate with people. If you think of the number of different relationships you have, you can experience relationships with your family, your friends, your lover, your children, your acquaintances, your work colleagues, even people within your wider community. And in terms of the enduring nature of our relationships, we can hold on to those relationships and indeed love people for decades. So we are a highly cooperative species. And we need to cooperate in lots of different ways just to survive. And the main reason for that is because of two anatomical quirks that have occurred in our evolutionary line. The first is our enormous brains. Our brains are 6 times bigger than they should be for a mammal of our body size. But also our bipedal stance. Because we walk on 2 legs, our birth canal has narrowed, meaning that our babies have to be born much earlier than they should be. This means we have to cooperate to raise our children. If you've ever looked after a newborn baby, even a toddler, you will know how dependent they are upon you. And that's simply because their brains are cracking ahead with a lot of development and they've come out of the womb unable to do a lot of things for themselves. So the first way we have to cooperate is to raise our children. Now, in our evolutionary history, we would first of all cooperated with our female kin to achieve that. But about 500,000 years ago, our brains took another massive leap in size and suddenly girl power was not sufficient. So we needed to turn to the next genetically related person to that child, and that was Dad. Human fatherhood evolved 500,000 years ago, and we are still the only ape and one of only 5% of mammals to have human fatherhood. That big brain also means we spend a lot of time innovating and developing new technologies, and that means there is a lot to learn in your life, both in terms of your social interactions and in terms of technological learning. Now, if you tried to do that on a trial and error basis, you would quickly fall apart. So we learn from each other. It's known as social learning, and if I were to tell you we are the only species on Earth that actively teaches each other, you might understand how rare this behaviour is in the animal kingdom. And finally, we need to cooperate just to subsist. Now, in the environment in which we evolved, I'm sure you can imagine how important that cooperation was. We had to cooperate to hunt. We had to cooperate to learn how to make the stone tools that enabled us to butcher our finds. We needed to cooperate to exchange information about the closest place to shelter or a water source. But even today, when you can probably order your food order from your sofa and take delivery without really interacting with anybody in any particularly extensive way, if you think of the number of fellow humans you have cooperated with to achieve that end goal of that grocery delivery, then we are still cooperating to subsist. So we need to cooperate to survive. But the problem is this: cooperation is tough. Ideally, in an ideal world, we would be entirely solitary, and all group animals would indeed be solitary, because cooperating with each other is stressful and it can indeed be survival threatening. First of all, people lie and they cheat and they steal, and you have to spend a lot of energy and a lot of cognitive power to check out who these people are, to spot who they are, so that you don't waste a lot of very valuable energy investing in relationships with people who ultimately are going to be costly to you. Secondly, we exist in a hierarchy. Like a lot of primate species, there's a hierarchy. Some of us are at the top, some of us are at the bottom, and some of us are in the middle. And because we exist in this hierarchy, and we're probably really hoping to raise through it, because the higher up you are, the easier access you have to things like food, water, shelter, reproductive mates, and indeed money, then you want to rise through that as quickly as possible. But that means you have to spend a lot of time monitoring everybody else in the hierarchy to make sure that nobody beneath you is trying to usurp your position and nobody above you is trying to stamp down too hard upon you. So existing in a hierarchy is a very time-consuming and stressful activity. Thirdly, you need to compete for those all-important resources, and you need to coordinate your day with other people. Now, if you were on your own, you could get up in the morning and do precisely what you wanted. But because we are group living, sometimes we have to carry out activities, spend time doing things that maybe wouldn't actually be on our ideal schedule. And indeed, sometimes we do things that are actually at a cost to ourselves because we need to remain within the group. And finally, possibly the most difficult cooperation of all is cooperation between the sexes. There is a reason why intra-sex cooperation, so cooperation between somebody of the same sex as you, evolves first. And that is because you trade similar currencies when you are cooperating. When you cooperate with someone, it's reciprocal, and you need to spend some time tallying up how often you have helped them and how often they have helped you, just to make sure that you are not left on the negative end of that particular trade deal. And when you're doing it with a fellow female, for example, in the environment in which we evolved, that was childcare, and we're trading similar currencies, and it's quite easy to make sure that things are mostly balanced. Men, on the other hand, were trading support in alliances, and those alliances were maybe to deal with being in a correct position or a higher position in the hierarchy, or, for example, to find access to the next mate. Now, when human fatherhood evolved, then they started having to cooperate with each other. And that is when the trade in unequal currencies came in. And because of that, we had to build a whole cognitive architecture and invest energy in carrying out these complicated currency conversions. So, we need to cooperate, but cooperation is hard and potentially survival threatening itself. So, what did evolution come up with to help us to want to invest in those relationships and maintain those relationships and reward us for doing so? Evolution came up with love.